Welcome back to another episode of BreBre Talks MMA. We have so much to talk about. I don't even know where to start. I guess we'll start with Fiorot versus Blanchfield. I actually didn't get to watch this live because I was at the Stand Up Fight Series event in St. Louis, a local kickboxing and Muay Thai promotion. So I wanted to go out there, support my teammates, support the local scene. And it was a great night of fights too, and we're gonna talk about that later. But first, we'll talk about UFC. So Fiorot versus Blanchfield. Honestly, this fight went exactly how I expected. You can go back to my prediction and kind of see what my thoughts were initially on this, and I think it played out pretty close to what I said because there just weren't a lot of ways for Aaron to win this fight, and I think that a lot of people were overlooking a lot of attributes for Fiorot. And it's because, there's been so much hype on Blanchfield, and for good reason. She's really talented. But I just think that a Muay Thai striker who has good takedown defense is going to be a nightmare for any grappler. That's just not... First of all, like I said in my prediction, Fiorot is huge. She's honestly should probably be competing at 135. I mean, you saw her weight cut. You saw what she looked like in the weigh-ins. So, yeah, she's big for the division. I can't think of many fighters that are as big as her besides maybe Valentina. But, even then, she's just huge. Manon is very, very strong. And like I said, her physicality is a lot of times what kind of gives her an advantage, especially against a wrestler. So, or I guess a grappler, whatever you want to call Blanchfield. I guess she's more known for her jiu-jitsu, but whatever. But anyways, and actually, in this fight, who got a takedown? It wasn't the grappler. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not necessarily... I don't think this is a bad loss for Erin Blanchfield, is I guess what I'm trying to get at here. I think this is good. First of all, it gives her the experience of experience of going all 5 rounds, not winning because she didn't win. But Blanchfield prior to this had never gone 5 rounds. Manon had. And I've had people try to argue with me about this. And if you go back and you look, early in her MMA career, she did go 5 rounds in South Africa. It was probably some kind of a title fight, I would assume. But yeah, there's plenty of times where we see fighters go 5 rounds before they even make it to the UFC. I don't think that really played a factor here. I think Blanchfield was very well prepared for a 5-round fight. I just think that, like I said, there weren't very many ways for her to win this. Manon has arguably probably the best takedown defense in that division, and Blanchfield, she's not huge for 125 either. I don't think she really cuts that much weight. So you put her in there with somebody who has Muay Thai experience, who has good wrestling, who's very strong, tall, physical. What'd you guys expect? I was shocked that Blanchfield was even a favorite. When I saw the odds, I was like, this makes no sense, because I get it. Blanchfield's 10 years younger, and she's got all the hype right now. She's young, and those are all things that I mentioned in my prediction. I'm like, these are the intangibles that might play a factor here if Blanchfield were to win. But looking at that fight on paper, there is no reason why anybody should be surprised. It just wasn't a great matchup for Blanchfield, honestly. I think somebody like Rose or even BreBre would have been a better matchup for her. I don't know if she's fought BreBre before. Has she? Actually, I'm going to look that up right now because I don't think they have fought, but that's a really interesting matchup that could be made, I think. Yeah. I don't know. I think, or what you could do is you could put BreBre with Rose, but now, okay, so this makes things really interesting, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into today. There's not really much to talk about with the performance. I mean, it was a 5-round dominant performance from Manon. Nothing crazy, nothing super special, nothing to really write home about necessarily, but it was a good performance. She dominated the fight. She went, she looked great, and her cardio wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be after looking at her in the weigh-ins. So yeah, she did a great job, and there's just not much to talk about when it comes down to the actual fight itself, because like I said, it played out exactly how I thought it would. But it does make things interesting for the 125 division. So what does Manon need to do to get a title shot? Is she ready for a title shot right now? Or does she need to have that rematch with Rose? Does she need to, fight somebody like BreBre? Or do Rose and BreBre need to fight and then Manon just waits it out for the title shot? I'm not mad at Manon getting the title shot next if Valentina wins, because I do really want to see that fight. I really want to see that. And I wouldn't be mad about it with Grasso either, but I do think that, I don't know, I would like to see what happens with Macy BreBre in her next fight before I'm like completely sold on, okay, Manon gets the next title shot. Because here's the thing, it's going to be a while before somebody's even going to be fighting for the 125 title next, because they're doing the Ultimate Fighter. Like I said before, they're doing the Ultimate Fighter. That's probably not going to be done until, I don't know, it's at least going to take a few months, I would think. And then they got to air the episodes, and then they got to do the whole thing. And so, I mean, we could be waiting 6 months before we see another title shot at women's flyweight, depending on, I don't know exactly how long the Ultimate Fighter is going to take, but I would assume it's going to be at least like 3 to 6 months before there's even a chance of a title shot. Because I'm assuming that's what they're going to do. I think they've already said that. That's what they're going to do. So I guess if Manon wants that title shot next, then yeah, she would have to kind of sit out and wait for it, unless, she decides to be active and fight somebody like Rose or BreBre. I would like to see the rematch with Rose. Now that Rose has gotten a win at 125, I do kind of like the idea of seeing that rematch. I think that it probably still favors Fiorot a little bit, but I would like to see it because Rose did have the dislocated finger in that fight, and it wasn't like a super dominant performance from Fiorot. I mean, it was clear that she won the fight. I don't think there was any argument over that, but I mean, it was a good fight, so I wouldn't be mad at seeing that again. But I just think that, yeah, it's just kind of confusing right now. Women's flyweight is just, what do you do? What what do you do? If Erin Blanchfield would have won, then I think it would have been interesting to see her versus BreBre for a title eliminator or number one contender fight or whatever you want to call it. But I do think that this fight kind of had title implications on it. So I wouldn't be surprised if Fiorot gets the next title shot. I just think that I wouldn't be mad at one more fight for BreBre or for Fiorot. I wouldn't be mad about it. So I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting, too, if Alexa Grasso beats Shevchenko again, then Macy BreBre can try to sell that rematch with Grasso. So I think that's interesting because that fight, it's been a while. It's been 3 years since they fought. So I wouldn't hate the idea of that rematch. I think that BreBre deserves it. I mean, she's put on quite the win streak since then. And yeah, so I wouldn't hate that. The only, like I've said this multiple times, the only criticism I have with BreBre is that there have been some like close decisions that, could have gone either way. So she doesn't have as many dominant performances as I would like to see, but at the same time, it is interesting. And I think that out of everybody in the top 15 at women's flyweight, the two people that would probably be my first choices for the title shot would be Macy and Fior or Manon. So that's what I think. But anyways, let's talk about Buckley. Joaquin Buckley got an impressive TKO over Vicente Luque. That was absolutely insane. I had a feeling he was going to win this fight for some reason. I just wasn't sure how he was going to do it because Vicente Luque is not an easy fight at all. And I definitely was not expecting him to finish Luque. So I don't know. And everybody's saying like, oh, it didn't look like Luque in there. And I don't know if I buy into that because his last fight, he looked great. So to me, that's kind of, I don't really like that. I feel like they're trying to discredit Buckley's performance a little bit, and I don't think that's what happened. I think Buckley is actually really good. So yeah, and here's the thing, like, people are saying like, well, people are saying that because Vicente Luque pulled guard basically, and you know, just looked like he kind of gave up in there. But the funny thing is that when Charles Oliveira does that, people are like, oh yeah, Charles Oliveira is trying to get a submission. And I'm like, so when Vicente Luque does it, he's not the same. He gave up, you know. But if Charles Oliveira does it, people are like, oh, this is amazing. I'm like, what? Like, there should be none of that in an MMA fight. If you are giving up dominant position, that doesn't work in MMA. It has worked a couple times, but overall, it usually doesn't go very well. And like that's why I was talking about that with Oliveira in Arman. If Oliveira pulls guard with Arman, I don't think that's going to go well. So yeah. I mean, that's why I pointed that out. Like, and I wouldn't even call that guard pulling. I've had so many people try to argue with me about this. The fight with Dariush was trying to get a takedown. And it didn't necessarily count as a takedown, and I realized that. But Oliveira gave up top position. And it wasn't like a guard pulling situation because he wasn't even in guard. And I don't know. It was just kind of weird. He almost like kind of just fell into the takedown. So it wasn't really a takedown, but he gave up top position. So to me, I don't know. Do you guys think if somebody gives up top position, that should count as a takedown for their opponent? Probably not, but it's an interesting thought because it's like, yeah, why would you give up top position? You know, unless you are just getting your butt whooped on the feet, or if you think that's your only way to victory is to get a submission off your back. You know, it's kind of like something maybe, you know, we've seen from Tony Ferguson, Nate Diaz. They were really slick from their back. And there's a lot of times where that does work. I just don't think it works as well as it used to. I think it used to work really well in MMA when less people were doing jiu-jitsu. But I don't think it works as well anymore, especially now that there's so many good wrestlers in MMA. So, yeah, that's what I think. I don't think that Luque necessarily gave up. I just think that maybe he was like, okay, you know, maybe this is how I can win the fight. Maybe I can get a submission off my back. I don't know. I'll have to watch it again to really see what happened there, but I didn't think so. I thought Buckley just, you know, he won the fight. He put on a great performance. Now, the performance that I did think was very controversial was Chris Weidman's win. That absolutely should not have happened. And here's my opinion on eye pokes. And there's a lot of different opinions on this. I think that some people... So here's basically the two camps with eye pokes. There's one camp that's like, eye pokes should absolutely be banned. If you get one eye poke, then you should be disqualified or whatever. And then there's another camp that doesn't seem to think that it's a huge problem, which is crazy to me. I think the more popular opinion is that eye pokes should be banned, but I'm kind of in the middle on it. I think one eye poke You should get either a warning or a point deduction if it's bad enough. I actually wouldn't be mad at an immediate point deduction for an eye poke. If they can verify that you poked your opponent in the eye, I honestly don't hate the idea of taking a point, because otherwise I think it's just going to continue. And it doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. I don't think it's really hardly ever intentional when it happens. But when it happens multiple times in one fight and nothing is done about it, that's crazy to me. And then they walk away with a victory, with a TKO victory after 4 eye pokes. That's insane. That's insane. Yeah, no. I think, yeah, that's just, it doesn't sit well with me. It does not sit well with me, because it's making it easier for people to continue doing this, because nothing, like, here's what I would have liked to see from the ref. Immediately when the fight started, Chris Weidman's hands were like going like this. And obviously, you know, when you're fighting, you're using your lead hand to kind of defend and to find your range and whatever, and that's fine, but his fingers were pointed out. So the ref should have seen that, should have recognized that, and given him a warning. And then when the first eye poke happened, he didn't even give Chris Weidman a warning. He said it was unintentional. And he didn't warn Chris Weidman at all. So that to me was just really strange. I didn't agree with the officiating there at all. And I'm not a ref, so this isn't my job. So, you know, it's hard for me to sit here and criticize somebody doing their job, but I've seen a lot of fights. I've watched a lot of fights, and any other ref, I think, would have handled it much differently. So I just really didn't like that. I thought that the first eye poke should have been at least a warning. And then he should have been paying attention to the fingers, because Chris Weidman had his fingers out the entire time. And then there was, yeah, the final eye poke that actually put a stop to the whole thing. Technically was 2 eye pokes. Chris Weidman poked him in the eye twice, in both eyes, or once in each eye. But I'm like, yeah, how did you not see that, first of all? And how did you not take a point? Or DQ? Honestly, I wouldn't have been mad at a DQ, because that's multiple fouls. I mean, I think 1 foul, okay, accidents happen, things happen, whatever, no big deal. 2 fouls, 3 fouls, 4 fouls? Get out of here. There is no way that should ever be tolerated. Ever. It's insane. So that's my opinion on that. Another wonderful moment this weekend was Nate the Train with the performance of the night. Spectacular finish. Man, I love seeing Nate the Train win, because I love his post-fight speeches. They are the absolute best. And it's funny, everybody's saying how he needs to have a conversation with Theo Von or something like that. I've been saying this for like a year or probably longer. I made a meme of Nate the Train, and I overlaid Theo Von's podcast on it, so it would sound like Theo, but it was Nate the Train talking, and it was amazing. Yes, of course they need to do a podcast. I think Nate the Train should get on Theo's podcast ASAP. Yeah, that's hilarious. I'm a big Nate Landwehr fan. Let's see what else we got going on. Oh, some fights were announced. So they announced Whittaker versus Chimaev. Interesting. So I guess Chimaev is fighting at 185, which is good. I mean, I know his last fight was at 185, but he wasn't fighting a real 185er, so it'll be interesting to see him fight a real 185er. And he has before, but he's never fought a former champion 185er, somebody that like is really hard to beat. I think that's the important thing here is like, it doesn't matter who you are or how good you are. Robert Whittaker is an absolute problem for anybody. Anybody. And yeah, like I said, at middleweight, I mean, he has, I feel like Khamzat has the more impressive performances at middleweight, but he doesn't have the more impressive resume at middleweight. He has a more impressive resume at 170. Like, he fought Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, you know, and even, I mean, I guess the Kevin Holland fight was catch weight, but Kevin Holland's at 170 now, so I don't know what you would consider that. But, yeah, I think the problem with Khamzat is that he's been so inactive that it's hard to predict his fights anymore. And he looks so different fight to fight. I don't even know how to predict this. And he's never fought anybody like Robert Whittaker. So I'm just not sure how this is going to go. I mean, I think this could be a really bad matchup for Whittaker, unfortunately. But at the same time, Whittaker could be a bad matchup for Khamzat. And it's hard to judge off the Usman fight, too, because Khamzat, I think, had a broken hand or some tendon was torn or some kind of weird injury. I think it was in the first round that he suffered that injury. So it's hard to say based off of that fight. It really just didn't really tell us much, except for, yeah, Usman got taken down pretty easily in the first round. So if he can do that to Usman, what can he do to Robert Whittaker? I don't know. I'm not sure, but also not a lot of people have really tried to take Usman down before that. Just because you're a good wrestler doesn't necessarily always mean that you have good wrestling defense. I think that's a big misconception with wrestlers. Sometimes wrestlers are really good offensively, but defensively, like when they're getting taken down, they don't have the same ability. So, and it's different in MMA too. So I'm not sure what to think of that performance. I don't know. I could see Khamzat getting a TKO, though. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But we'll see. I guess it's going to be a 5-round fight, because I think it's the main event. I don't even think it's a pay-per-view. I think it's a fight night main event, which is crazy. That's a huge fight for a fight night main event, if that's the case. And I think that's going to be the one in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if they have it officially on the UFC's website yet. Let me see. Oh, they do. Yeah, it's a UFC fight night, Saturday, June 22nd. Oh my God, my allergies are so bad. I'm sorry. And another fight that got announced on that same card is Kelvin Gastelum versus Daniel Rodriguez. I didn't see this fight coming. This is a really interesting fight. I have no idea who I think is going to win that. It's so hard. Gastelum's another one that's hard to predict too, because sometimes he surprises you, but then sometimes he surprises you in the wrong way, and you're like, what happened? Kelvin, what happened here? So I'm not sure what to think of that. I mean, if I would have seen this fight a couple years ago, I probably would have been like, oh, Kelvin Gastelum all the way. But I still don't know if I like Kelvin Gastelum at welterweight yet. I don't know how I feel about it. So we'll see. But I don't know. It's an interesting fight either way. And then what else do I want to talk about? Oh, Jim Miller versus Bobby Green is a fight at UFC 300 that I would like to discuss. This is an OG lightweight banger. They're both very unique fighters, and even in all of Jim Miller's experience, he's really still never fought anybody like Bobby Green, and I don't know that there's another Bobby Green out there. So we'll just run through the numbers real quick. Jim Miller He's been in 43 fights in the UFC, not including his pro MMA fights before the UFC. He is 37-17 in pro MMA. Bobby Green has 24 UFC fights, and he is 31-15 in pro MMA. He had a pretty lengthy career. He was in Strikeforce. So Bobby Green is honestly just as much of a vet as Jim Miller, and that's why I'm so excited for this fight, because they both have so much experience. Jim Miller's record in the UFC is 26-16 with 1 no contest. Bobby Green's UFC record is 12-10 with 1 draw and 1 no contest. So record in last 5 fights, Jim Miller is 4-1 in his last 5. Bobby Green is 2-2 with 1 no contest. Bobby Green is 37. Jim Miller is 40. So Bobby Green is a little bit younger. Jim Miller is 5'8". Bobby Green is 5'10". The reach is the same. Both have a 71-inch reach. And Jim Miller is a southpaw. Bobby Green, he's considered an orthodox, but I would consider him switch because he does throw a lot from southpaw. And he switches his stances a lot. So I would consider him switch stance, but they have him on there as orthodox. Jim Miller obviously has the more experience, but I would say Bobby Green has the better striking. So, and if you look at the numbers paint that picture pretty clearly, because significant strikes landed per minute for Jim Miller, it's 2.96. For Bobby Green is 6.14. That's pretty high. Striking accuracy, 42% for Jim Miller, 52% for Bobby Green. Strikes absorbed per minute, 3.18 for Jim Miller, 3.74 for Bobby Green. Striking defense, 58% for Jim Miller, 62% for Bobby Green. So it's pretty clear that Bobby Green has the advantage in the striking. Not only looking at it on paper, but just watch him fight. I mean, it's pretty clear who has the better striking. I do think that Jim Miller has underrated striking, though. And when you have that much experience, you cannot make it in the UFC this long without having good striking. So because Jim Miller is so good at grappling, people kind of forget that he does have power in his hands, and he has knocked people out before. He's dropped people before. So Bobby Green, I feel like he has the better defense overall, but if he does get hit, can be vulnerable. His last fight against Jalen Turner, I think everybody kind of saw that coming. But he did get knocked out. How is that going to affect him? That was, 5 months ago? Not even. Like I said, Jim Miller, he's not the most technical striker. I do think there are some opportunities for Jim Miller to counter, and he's done it before. When he fought Jesse Butler, there was a little sequence there right before Jesse Butler got knocked out. And this was one of my favorite Jim Miller performances, because to see him just knock somebody out cold like that was just crazy. It was awesome. This late in his career, to be able to do that still is pretty sweet. Jesse threw a 2-3. Keep in mind, Jim Miller is a southpaw, and he was fighting an orthodox fighter. Miller countered that first 2-3. He countered it with his 2. Jesse threw the exact same combination, a 3-2, and Jim Miller countered it again, and when he landed it, knocked Jesse Butler out. Now, is Bobby Green going to get dropped or knocked out by that same punch? I don't know, and that's the big question mark. Because I do think that Jim Miller has good counter-striking, just based on, he's improved so much in his career, too. Like, he's a fighter that's still getting better as he gets older. There are more opportunities for Jim Miller to win than people think. If you look at it, I think that Jim Miller has more ways to win than Bobby Green, but I would imagine Bobby Green would probably still be the favorite in this fight. Jim Miller isn't really known for his striking. Like I said, he's known for his grappling. First of all, he has an excellent guillotine. He's great off of his back. If you get caught in his guillotine, you're done. If Jim Miller gets a hold of your back, you're screwed. Or also, if he gets a guillotine, you're screwed. Honestly, I think Jim Miller has one of the best guillotines in the UFC. Like, seriously, go watch it. Go watch every single time he's got a guillotine. It's freaking awesome. So here's some things I've gathered about Bobby Green. One thing that I've noticed is that he does tend to struggle a little bit against southpaws, which is why I do think there is a potential for Jim Miller to catch him and potentially either drop him and then finish him on the ground, because Jim Miller has great ground and pound too. Just a couple things that I've noticed. Obviously, he fights with his hands down. I think everybody's aware of that. He's very heavy on the lead leg. And one thing I notice about Bobby Green is he kind of leads with his head a little bit. But it's interesting because he has such good defense. So you would think that, like, everything that Bobby Green does that you would think doesn't work, it works somehow. It's kind of confusing. But another thing about Bobby Green, he has a lot of explosive movements. He throws a lot of feints, but they're not like your typical kind of feint because he has his hands down. So it's not like when Sean O'Malley is throwing feints. It's not like that. It's much different. He's kind of just like moving. Like, you'll notice it when he fights. Like he just kind of, he's constantly like, moving. And it's very interesting. One thing about Bobby Green, and this is probably because he fights with his hands down, he has an excellent jab. His jab can do so much damage. I think he actually has probably one of the more underrated jabs in the UFC, because just the power he's able to generate with it, and you're not able to see it. He throws it off rhythm. There's so many reasons why it works so well. And it's because his style is so unorthodox. It's so non-traditional. Another thing about Bobby Green, he's comfortable fighting backwards, and I think that makes him very dangerous. It also does kind of make him susceptible to counters, but I do think it makes him dangerous in a lot of aspects, because he's not going to stop throwing just because he's backed up against the fence or just because you're pressuring him. He's still going to be throwing. He's comfortable fighting backwards. He's comfortable against the fence. So I think that's one thing to note about Bobby Green. He also has great head movement. He also switches stances a lot. And that is one thing that I think works really well for him in a lot of scenarios, but I do think that he has better defense in southpaw. So I think that an opportunity for Jim Miller would be, if Bobby Green is throwing from orthodox, that would probably be a great opportunity to throw counters, because Bobby Green, for some reason, seems to have better defense when he's in southpaw. I don't know why, but that's just kind of one thing that I kind of picked up. And it's weird because he does better against orthodox fighters. And I think sometimes it's just easier, like defense is easier in different stances. For example, I'm a southpaw. I have pretty decent defense from southpaw. When I switch to orthodox, my defense is not as good, not even close. And it also opens you up to different strikes, And if Jim Miller throws that right hook when Bobby Green is in orthodox stance, I think that's going to be easier to land than if Bobby Green was in southpaw. Also, I noticed that when Tony Ferguson switched to southpaw, that's when he had some success against Bobby Green. And he actually dropped him in that fight, if you guys remember. It was absolutely insane. I feel like nobody remembers that. Everybody's just like, Tony Ferguson sucks. And it's like, dude, he dropped Bobby Green. You guys forget? He still has good moments in these fights. I mean, he's not, like, Tony Ferguson isn't completely the same as he used to be, obviously. But he still has great moments in fights. And I bring that up because I don't think Bobby caught the switch. I don't think he picked up on it. And I think that's why Tony was able to land that shot. And it was a subtle stance switch from Tony. It wasn't very obvious. It wasn't a big movement. It was very subtle. So I think that's why it worked. And it was a right hand that Tony caught him with. If Bobby Green switches to orthodox, I think it makes him more vulnerable to that right hand. If he's in southpaw, I think he'll probably be able to defend it better. Here's where I think Bobby Green has a huge advantage. Bobby Green has very good takedown defense. I'm going to find the number here. 74% takedown defense for Bobby Green. That's really good. Jim Miller doesn't have the highest takedown accuracy, but it's still pretty good. He's got 44% takedown accuracy, which isn't bad. It's better than a lot of grapplers, actually. There's definitely an opportunity for Jim Miller to take him down. I just think it's going to be difficult. I think Bobby Green is hard to take down, and partially because he does fight with his hands down, and partially, too, because Bobby Green has really good knees in the clinch. And as soon as Jim Miller tries to go for a takedown, depending on how he tries to take him down, Bobby Green is probably going to immediately start throwing knees to the body. A double leg, kind of similar to what Islam did against the fence, that could work, but I could still see Bobby Green being able to defend that just because Jim Miller isn't isn't Islam Makhachev. A couple statistics that I want to talk about. So we already talked about takedown accuracy. So 44% for Jim Miller, 37% for Bobby Green. Takedown defense, 48% for Jim Miller, 74% for Bobby Green. Submission attempts per 15 minutes, 1.7 for Jim Miller, 0.3 for Bobby Green. Bobby Green does have good grappling, though. I feel like people forget about that. This isn't necessarily a grappler versus striker. It feels like it because Jim Miller's more known for his grappling. I think he has like 20 submission wins. So he's obviously known for his grappling. But Bobby Green is a vet too, so he's got good grappling, he's got good striking. I feel like this is just a really well-matched fight. And this fight was supposed to happen 10 years ago. And I think this is the 4th time that it's been booked. I think there's a very high likelihood that this fight does not go the distance just because of both of their finishing ability. So I do think the chances are very high that this fight does end in a finish. I just don't know who it's going to be. I've picked against Bobby Green before in the Grant Dawson fight, and I was like, dang, I was wrong. It's MMA. They both might win. That's why they have to fight. Like, anybody who thinks they know everything with these predictions is just insane. Like, yeah, you can get good at predicting fights and analyzing fights, but at the end of the day, like I said, it's MMA. So literally anything can happen. There are so many ways to lose in this fight. You cannot predict MMA perfectly every single time. It's impossible. Too many weapons available, too many ways to win, too many ways to lose. Yeah, it's just not an easy sport to predict. And a lot of times people ask me, like, oh, I'm betting on the fights, what should I pick? And I'm like, I don't bet on fights. I analyze fights. I do fight breakdowns, but I don't bet on fights because you can't. I mean, well, you can if you want to. That's fine. But I just think that there's, like, too much risk with MMA. Like, ugh. Yeah, that would give me anxiety. Allen versus Curtis. So this fight is coming up on Saturday. This is the rematch between Brendan Allen and Chris Curtis. This fight was originally supposed to be Brendan Allen versus Marvin Vettori, but Marvin Vettori unfortunately had to withdraw. So we get this rematch, which was just felt very random, but I like it. One important thing about Chris Curtis, gosh, I feel like this is Manon Fiorot versus Aaron Blanchfield 2.0 because I'm about to read this statistic and I'm about to say the exact same thing I said in that matchup. Although I do think this is going to be a lot different of a fight. But Chris Curtis has 92% takedown defense. Another important thing to know about Chris Curtis is he has a lot of power in his hands. And if he touches you, you might go down. Brendan Allen, and he experienced that in the first fight. And yeah, he went down. And it was bad. I do think that Brendan Allen has improved a lot since then. I think that Allen needs to be really careful getting countered, though, because Chris Curtis is an excellent counter striker and he has a ton of power. And that's kind of what Chris Curtis does. He kind of forces you to fight his fight to make it a little ugly. And in doing that, he opens you up for counters because now you're playing his game. And if Brendan Allen does that, I do think that there's a huge possibility that he is going to get knocked out or TKO'd in this fight. Chris Curtis, while he does have high takedown defense, it is hard to judge that because if you look at some of his recent fights, like if you look at the fight with Imavov took him down multiple times. An interesting thing about this fight in both of these guys is they both have 5-round experience. So this is going to be a 5-round fight because it's a main event. But they both have 5-round experience before the UFC. And you'll see this a lot of times with an LFA vet. Like Brendan Allen fought for LFA for quite a bit before he entered the UFC. And when he was in LFA, he had multiple 5-round fights. And you'll see that a lot because they do the title fights in LFA and they have those 5-rounders. So he already has 5-round experience. So that's awesome for Brendan Allen. I think that's huge. I think one thing that he could try to do would be to back Curtis up to the fence. I think if Brendan Allen can be the one pressuring, I think while that will kind of open him up to counters, I do think that's a better strategy because it could potentially set up the grappling, which that's going to be the hard part. How do I get Chris Curtis to the ground? What Imavov did, he had him kind of against the fence and it was It was kind of weird the way that he took him down, but it worked really, really well. I think that if Brendan takes a similar approach like he did with Silva too, that could work potentially, because he could try to back Chris Curtis up to the fence. And if he can hurt him on the feet, then he could finish the fight right there like he did with Silva. I just think that it's a lot harder to hurt Chris Curtis than it is a lot of other fighters. If Brendan Allen wants to win this fight, I think he has to get it to the ground. I don't think there's an option. I don't think you're going to win this fight on the feet with Chris Curtis, especially with it being a 5-round fight. That, like, Chris Curtis is going to outbox you. If you stand with Chris Curtis for 5 rounds, you're going to get outboxed, you're going to lose the fight, or you're going to get knocked out. So I don't think that Brendan Allen can stand with Chris Curtis in this situation, unless it's a similar situation like the Bruno Silva fight, like I was talking about, when he had him against the fence, he got him hurt, and then he finished the fight right there. Yeah, he's going to have to get this fight to the ground somehow. I just don't know how he's going to do it. I do think his grappling has improved a lot, though. I think that Allen is one of the best grapplers at middleweight right now. I just think that it's going to be hard for him to take Chris Curtis down. And Chris Curtis has only been submitted 1 time in his entire MMA career, and I think he's got like 40-something fights. He's only been submitted 1 time. He does kind of have a short neck, too. So I actually think the best route for Brendan Allen would probably be ground and pound, you know, depending on if he gets his back, if he gets on top, if he's able to even take him down. I mean, what if he isn't able to take Chris Curtis down? What is he going to do? He's just going to have to get lucky on the feet, I think. I don't know. I just think that this fight favors Chris Curtis, actually. And I mean, he won the first fight, so it's not really crazy to say that. It's just because I think this is a much harder matchup for Brendan Allen than Vettori was. Marvin Vettori's excellent on the ground. So I think that was a tough fight in that sense, but I think that Brendan had more opportunities there. I think there were more opportunities for Brendan Allen to win in that fight than there are against Chris Curtis, just because he does have such good takedown defense. He's got power in his hands. He's got really good boxing. I think that this is a tougher matchup, and especially on short notice. You know, Brendan's been preparing for a completely different opponent. So I actually do like Chris Curtis's chances in this fight. I really do. So it's going to be interesting what happens. But I am leaning toward Chris Curtis, to be honest. And in my prediction for Vettori versus Allen, I was picking Brendan Allen. And now I'm kind of like, ooh, I don't know. Marvin Vettori is a lot more hittable than Chris Curtis. Chris Curtis has way better defense. He actually has really good defense. Some hot topics that I wanted to discuss, because there's been so much craziness going on in the MMA world. I wanted to talk about GSP versus Khabib. For some reason, GSP is talking about fighting Khabib, theoretically. I don't think this fight's going to happen, but it is interesting, and it could be them kind of testing the waters with it. You know, maybe they're trying to see, are people interested in this fight? Like, would people really jump out of their seats for this? Because if it can make enough money, and if it can be like a really big event, I think there's a chance that it could happen. I just think that Khabib is like a man of his word. I don't think he's the type of guy to retire and then unretire. That doesn't seem like Khabib. So I don't know. But there are a lot of fighters like Jose Aldo. I didn't think he was going to come back out of retirement. So who knows? But I have been thinking about this a lot because I've always wanted to see. This is the number one fight that I've always wanted to see. There is no fight I want to see more than GSP versus Khabib. There's no fight I want to see more than that. That is my dream, absolute dream fight. Who wins that fight? I think GSP wins that fight 10 out of 10 times. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think that GSP is the better mixed martial artist than Khabib. Is that crazy? Is that a hot take? I don't think so. I think that actually Islam Makhachev would be a more difficult matchup for GSP than Khabib, which is kind of insane. But yeah, I think GSP wins that fight. I really do. You know why? because GSP is the type of fighter who is going to beat you at your own game. That was what he was always known for. It's what he's always been good at. And also, one thing about GSP is that he has very excellent grasp of every single aspect of martial arts, at least on a basic level. So his jab, basic boxing is excellent. And it's just so many things about his game that you could talk about. His grappling, his jiu-jitsu, his wrestling, everything is good. Excellent. So it's just, how are you going to beat GSP? I don't think that Khabib's usual strategy would work on GSP. I really don't. And also, I think GSP would piece him up on the feet before he even got a chance to try to take him down. That's what I think. I think GSP would be able to hurt Khabib on the feet really bad. And I don't think he would even have a chance to grapple. So I'm taking GSP in that matchup. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. First of all, do you want to see that fight? And then what do you think would happen? I actually think it would even be cool if they did a grappling match. Like, not even do a fight, just do a grappling match. I think that would be cool. So, and I think GSP, did he ever do that grappling match with Damian Maia? I can't remember. I know he was supposed to. I don't remember if that ever happened. But anyways, moving on to the next hot topic. Mighty Mouse, Demetrius Johnson, one of the greatest fighters of all time, beat a 250-pound man in a jiu-jitsu tournament. This was amazing. I love this so much. I love this more than I love Sean Strickland beating the crap out of Sneeko. I love this way more. This is great. This is great for the sport. This is great for everyone. Because I never want to hear Bradley Martin say another word about I can beat an MMA fighter ever again. Demetrius Johnson is like the same size as me, and I'm not very big. I'm 5'1". Demetrius Johnson's maybe like 1 inch, 2 inches taller than me. And guys, he weighs, I think he said he weighs like 135 pounds or 145 pounds or something like that. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he's not very big. I think he's like 135 pounds. And beat a 250-pound man. He beat somebody twice his size in jiu-jitsu. What do you think's going to happen in MMA? It's going to be even worse. You can't throw punches in jiu-jitsu. You can in MMA. So if Bradley Martin thinks he has any chance against Demetrius Johnson, he's absolutely out of his mind. I don't care how big you are. Stop. 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 Anyways. They also announced the main event of UFC St. Louis. And I'm very excited because our boy Derek Lewis is going to be in the main event. And I don't know how I feel about this matchup. He's fighting Rodrigo Nascimento. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I don't know what to expect from this. I just hope that Derek Lewis is able to just get up if he gets taken down. I hope Derek Lewis wins this fight. It would be so cool. Because, guys, remember, this fight's going to be in St. Louis. This is my hometown. So how cool would it be if Derek Lewis won a fight in St. Louis, did his famous post-fight speech? Oh, my God. That would be awesome. That would be great. So I'm rooting for Derek Lewis. Sorry, Rodrigo. But I got to root for Derek Lewis here. Because it's anytime Derek Lewis wins, that is good for the sport of MMA. All right? It's good for the sport. I support it. Please, Derek Lewis. That would just be so awesome. I am such a big fan of Derek Lewis. You guys have no idea. I'm so excited. I am so excited for that card. Because Sean Woodson is fighting Alex Caceres. That is the fight I'm most excited for. I think that fight is going to be an absolute banger. Oh, and Joaquin Buckley called out Anheuser-Busch. Said he wants to fight in St. Louis. and on the May 11th event. So I would absolutely love to see that. Joaquin Buckley is a huge part of St. Louis MMA. I would love to see him fight here. I think that would be awesome. I think he has to. That if he's not on the card, that would be kind of disappointing, because he's another one of the guys that, you know, he doesn't train in St. Louis anymore. He doesn't live here anymore, but he comes to a lot of the local shows, and, you know, he still supports the community. He represents St. Louis any chance he can. So, hell yeah. I would love to see Joaquin Buckley on this card. I think that would be awesome. So I hope that happens. And he called out MVP, which I think is an amazing call out. That is such a good call out, because the hype, the build up for that would be absolutely nuts. The only thing is, how do you put that as a co-main event? I think that would be the main event if that fight actually happened. Or anybody. If Joaquin Buckley gets matched with anybody in the top 15, I think that has to be a main event. I don't think you can put that as a co-main event. I mean, you can. I'll take it if that's what has to happen. But I wouldn't be mad at them moving Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. I wouldn't be mad at them moving that to the co-main event and put Buckley versus MVP as the main event. Now we're talking. That could be a co-main event on a pay-per-view. So that can definitely sell out an arena. I think Buckley versus anybody is going to be huge for St. Louis. So if the UFC is listening, if you guys could move, no offense to the heavyweight division, but like, nobody really ever wants to see a heavyweight 5-rounder unless it's Cain Velasquez. So like, I don't really have any desire. I don't need this fight to be 5 rounds. It could be 3 rounds and we're cool with that. So move the main event to the co-main spot and put Buckley in there with a top 15. MVP would be fantastic. And actually, that's a great call out, because nobody's calling out MVP. Nobody wants to fight MVP because his style is so confusing and awkward and hard to really even touch him. I mean, Kevin Holland got frustrated with it, and he has the longest reach probably of any of them. So I think that MVP is a brilliant call out, because he's a huge name. He was already a huge name before coming to the UFC. Then with the win over Kevin Holland, I mean, yeah, that's a great call out. So let's please make it happen. I would absolutely love to see Joaquin Buckley in the main event, or even the co-main, but I would rather see it as the main event for the UFC event in St. Louis. How dope would that be if a St. Louis-born fighter was in the main event at a UFC St. Louis event? That's awesome. That needs to happen. They need to make that happen. I think there's a high possibility that they might. And he's willing to make a pretty quick turnaround for that. So I think that's awesome. I'm excited. I'm very excited for Joaquin Buckley. I like what he's doing at 170. I'm glad he moved down to that weight class. I think he's much better suited for that weight class. So I'm very, very excited. So before we go, we still have more to discuss. We still have not talked about stand-up fight series, so let's run through that really quick. I'm not going to go super in-depth on all the fights, but I do want to make sure to cover it. Sean Counts won his fight via unanimous decision. That was the first fight of the night, and that was such a good fight, honestly. That was probably the best way they could have kicked off the card, in my opinion. Like, if they had kicked it off with either that or the first women's fight, I would have been happy, because those were both excellent fights. They were very good. Just a good way to set the tone for the night. So whoever decided to put that fight first on the card, I think that was brilliant, and I love it. I love it. And Chad Mueller always does such a great job with these. So if you're not familiar, if you're one of my listeners from outside of the state or outside of the country, Stand-Up Fight Series is a kickboxing and Muay Thai promotion based right here in St. Louis, and it's put on by Chad Mueller, who is also a former fighter. He owns a gym, Maryville Muay Thai, and they recently just opened All Saints Muay Thai. So very, very involved with Muay Thai, but trying to make it bigger in the U.S., trying to build a Muay Thai scene here for St. Louis, which I think is absolutely amazing and super important. So I'm so excited for what the future holds for Stand Up Fight Series, because I think it's just going to keep getting better and better. And this show was excellent. The matchups were just fantastic. The second fight of the night, Dante Sweeney got a TKO in 24 seconds. This was hilarious because so his opponent walks out, goes to his corner, whatever, and then he walks out and doesn't have his headgear on. And I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to his headgear. I have no idea. But I remember the ref was like, headgear, and then they had to go get the headgear. So they were basically just kind of trying to entertain the crowd and try to distract everybody for a second. But it was really funny because it took longer to get the headgear than like the whole fight. Like me and my friend Amber were sitting next to each other. We're like, the headgear situation took longer than the actual fight did. And he didn't even need the headgear because he got a TKO in 24 seconds. And it was beautiful. But yeah, that was awesome. That was I just thought it was funny. I'm kind of glad it happened because it made everybody laugh, and it was just kind of a fun little thing. But yeah, he did not need the headgear, so I guess I'm glad they got it though, just to be safe. You know, you want to be safe. And then Chris Karagiannis, I forget how he pronounced his name, but he won via TKO. I was so impressed with that one. First of all, it was a banger fight. It was a great fight. Very back and forth, very fun. It was crazy. Like, the pace they put on was just absolutely insane. And then Chris got the TKO. I think he trains out of the church because I'm pretty sure I saw Jamie in his corner. But yeah, I was impressed. That was awesome. And then Brandon Murphy, he won via split decision. And I actually agreed with the judges on that one. I agreed with that decision, but I thought it could have gone either way. So I wasn't like surprised, but I was like, oh, you know, could have gone either way. I thought it was a good fight. A lot of these fights could have gone either way. They were very competitive, which just shows you how good the matchmaking is because the fights were so competitive. And then Raymond Mix, he won his fight via unanimous decision. That was another good fight. Honestly, I don't think there was a bad fight on this card. I cannot think of a fight where I was sitting there bored. I was completely entertained the entire time. And I have really bad ADHD, so that's hard to do. Ty Prackett, he won via unanimous decision. Gosh. Decision. Ty Prackett won via unanimous decision. That was a great performance. It's always fun watching Ty Prackett. If you've never seen him fight, oh my God, what are you doing? It is so much fun. And then Nicholas Rivera, he won via unanimous decision as well. That was another great fight. Lacey Brayton won via unanimous decision. She trains at my gym, ES MMA and Fitness, so I was very excited to see her win. She is amazing. She is so good. She's relentless with her combinations. Like, she won't throw a 4-punch combination. She will throw like 12 punches, 20 punches in a row, and she just chains them together so beautifully. Her kicks were really good too, and her knees. That was what I was really impressed with. So just overall, she's got amazing striking, and I was very impressed with that performance. So very exciting for the team too. ESMMA and Fitness went 3-0. So we got 3 wins and took home 2 belts. So that is awesome. I'm so excited and so freaking proud of the ESMMA and Fitness team. Guys, man, I feel like people sleep on our gym so much. It's like, because it's a new gym. But man, Eric is such a good coach, and he has such imposter syndrome. He gets mad when people give him compliments, I feel like. But Eric is such a good coach. Like, I was so glad to be up front, and he was in the corner right in front of me, so I could kind of see and I could hear everything he was saying. So I really got to have the full Eric Steenberg cornering experience. It was fantastic. I love watching Eric corner. It's so fascinating to me watching coaches corner, but Eric especially, because he stays really calm, but then when he needs to, like, he will kind of dial it up a little bit. He did, especially in Austin's fight. But I thought Austin did great. You know what surprised me though? His opponent, Kyle Messiah, was tough, and he was a lot better than I was expecting. Like, I was expecting Austin to kind of run through him, to be honest, but no, that is not what happened. And I think that just his opponent, first of all, took the fight on short notice, so props to him for taking the fight. And he put on a tough fight for Austin. Like, he did not make it easy. And then I skipped one, but Jackson Crum ended up winning that fight via unanimous decision. That was the fight before Austin Miller. And that fight was absolutely insane. That fight was insane. I think his opponent was Kylan Pierce. Yeah, Jackson Crum versus Kylan Pierce. This was a BreBre certified banger. This fight was so freaking good. I had a lot of fun, especially that fight. That fight was, oh my God, that was insane. Insane fight. But yeah, Jackson Crum, he ended up getting the win there. And then skipping back ahead to Troy Harvey Valiant, he got a TKO win. That was my performance of the night. I was the most impressed with that performance of any on the card. Troy Harvey Valiant got a TKO. Super, super impressive. Trey Lewis, he got a unanimous decision win. Won the IKF Light Cruiserweight Missouri-Arkansas Muay Thai title. And I'll be honest, I was not expecting this fight to go the distance. And this was a 5-round fight, which was awesome. But I thought Trey Lewis was going to go in there and knock that guy out. So I was wrong. His opponent was tougher than I thought. So, yeah. But and it's not necessarily that I didn't think his opponent would be tough. It's just that when Trey Lewis gets in there, he knocks people out. I've seen him do it. And it's kind of scary. So I was expecting a knockout. But it went the distance, which actually turned out to be a great fight. So I'm kind of glad it did. But, yeah, that was awesome. That was awesome. I thought it was pretty clear that Trey won the fight, but it was competitive. It was a good fight. And then Kendall Whited, he ended up winning via unanimous decision and won the Illinois Missouri light middleweight Muay Thai title. That's a mouthful. So Kendall Whited won, ended up winning the title, and I'll give you a little backstory on this fight. So Kendall had basically already won the title, essentially. I mean, you still have to fight, but his opponent, Reese Newman, missed weight. I saw 10 pounds somewhere, but I think it was actually 9 pounds. Kendall still took the fight, though. So props to Kendall for taking it. I mean, you're basically fighting in a different weight class at that point. So, and I don't know what happened with Reese. I don't know what the story was behind that. I don't know what he's dealing with. You know, there could be more to it that I don't know. So that's why I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, you missed weight, you know. Obviously, you need to make weight for a fight. But I'm not going to, you know, harp on that too much. Now, what I am a little confused with is that he's saying that it was a robbery. So Reese Newman thinks that he should be the one who got his hand raised. I did not think that there was any controversy in the decision. I thought it was very clear that Kendall won the fight because Kendall had excellent defense that entire fight. He blocked and slipped most of the shots that Reese threw at him. Most of the kicks and the punches, they were all blocked or they were defended somehow, whether it was a slip or a duck or a roll or a block, whatever it was. They were defended. So he definitely won 2 rounds. I would say you could even argue that he won all 3 rounds. And I've rewatched the fight twice. You know, I watched the fight live at the event, which I try not to really count that in my decision of like who I thought won the fight. So I went back and watched it twice because I recorded it on my phone. I have it on my phone and I watched it twice. And I still thought Kendall won. Even if he would have won, there would have been a huge asterisk next to that, because he missed weight by so much. You know, it was almost like he was forced to fight in a completely different weight class. So if anybody was robbed, I think it was Kendall. I think Kendall was robbed of a fair fight because you didn't make weight. It was a great fight, though. It was a great fight. It lived up to the hype. It was a great fight. But yeah, Kendall just has really good defense. And one of his biggest influences is Floyd Mayweather. And you can see that in the way that he fights. And really, when it came down to it, what won Kendall the fight was his boxing. He had the better boxing in the fight. And I know this is a kickboxing fight, but Kendall had the better boxing. He had the better defense, and he landed the cleaner shots. So, yeah, I thought it was a very impressive performance from Kendall. Honestly, I would say that was probably my favorite performance from him so far, just because of the caliber of his opponent and how he won the fight. And just, yeah, I mean, it was a competitive fight. It was a good fight. And I think that, I wouldn't be mad if they ran it back, but I think that if they do, then I think that Reese needs to make weight next time if they do. But I wouldn't hate this rematch, honestly. I would like to see this fight again. It was a fun fight. But I don't know. I don't know what they have in store for both those guys next. I'm still a fan. I still think Reese Newman's a great fighter. And then we had a really great women's fight. So Ariana Kimball versus Alex Tremaine. I knew this was going to be a good fight because Alex Tremaine, she's one of my favorite to watch in the local scene. She is so fun to watch, and she is so talented, and she's really tough. And not only is she tough, but she's also very technically skilled. And this fight, gosh, it was so fast paced. I mean, it was insane. And I always tell people, I'm like, the women's fights are usually really good. Like, people sleep on women's combat sports so much, especially kickboxing. Women's kickboxing, women's boxing, it's so fun to watch. And it's so fast-paced. It's so just crazy. Man, this fight was insane. Alex Tremaine took a significant amount of damage in this fight, so I was not shocked at all who the decision went to. But I will say that, man, Alex Tremaine showed a lot of heart. She showed a lot of skill. She had some really good moments in this fight, even though she lost. And she's just a dog. She's an absolute savage, and I cannot wait to see her fight again. So even though she lost this fight, I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing. I think this just shows how much of an actual, real true fighter Alex Tremaine is. I think that's what it showed. I think that, obviously you don't want to lose fights, but if you are, I think that's the way to do it, because she just showed, she has that, never back down kind of mentality. And she has heart. She's able to stay in the fight even when she, her face is all bloodied up and she's hurt. And she never for a second looked like she was going to quit. She stayed in the fight the whole time. And I think even though she lost, I think that was just a good showing for both fighters, honestly. I think that was just beautiful matchmaking. That was just great. But, and it would have been cool to see Alex win, of course, because I really like Alex. I think she's really talented, and I love watching her fight. And I know she was training jiu-jitsu quite a bit whenever I was training at St. Charles MMA, and that she trains at St. Charles MMA. So I wonder if she's ever going to go into MMA. I think that would be awesome. And I don't know what rank her belt is, or I don't know any of that with her jiu-jitsu experience, but I know she was training a decent amount of jiu-jitsu when I was there, and I did one class with her, and she was really, really nice. And I don't know. Yeah, I think that would be interesting to see her in MMA. I think that would be really awesome, because we need more women MMA fighters, especially in St. Louis. There's none. I feel like there's not enough. We need more. So that would be cool. And then the main event, Michael Offer. He ended up winning via unanimous decision. This was an excellent fight. Michael Offer is so fun to watch. First of all, he's huge. I don't know how tall he is. I think he's 6'4", but he's just a gigantic person. And so watching him fight is just crazy. Super athletic, just super technical. It's just really always great watching him fight. And I remember he was in the main event with Nathan Stearns in Stand Up Fight Series the first time I ever went to one of their shows. And that fight was incredible. That was still probably my favorite fight that I've seen of him. but this one was great too. This was an excellent fight. Great way to end the night. Really overall, this just was an amazing event. And I thought it was just, every single time I go to Stand Up Fight Series, I get excited. And I looked at Amber when we first got to the fights, and I was just like, these are the best local shows, you know? And I love going to local MMA, and I love going to all the local shows, but Stand Up is my favorite, and it probably always will be, because I just love the action, the theatrics, like not even just the fights, like just the whole vibe of everything is just great. And I love watching Muay Thai. It's just awesome. It's awesome. I love watching it. I will always be the most excited for Stand Up Fight Series, no matter what, you know. Like, it is just my favorite. I freaking love it. But yeah, it was a great night of fights, and I'm very excited to see Kendall, Austin, and Lacey. They all got wins. So congratulations to Austin Miller, Kendall Whited, Lacey Brayton. Congratulations on your wins. Congratulations to the ES MMA and fitness team as a whole. Just absolutely insane what we have been able to do. And just the growth that I've seen even since I started training there has been amazing, honestly. And yeah, shout out to Eric. You know, I mean, he's just such a good coach and really cares about his fighters. Whether you're in the UFC or you have one amateur fight, he does not care. Like, he's a good coach, and he is going to try. And it's hard because he has so many people now at the gym, but he tries to give everybody as much individual attention as he can, which I think is awesome. And yeah, he's great. So I'm excited. I get so pumped up after I go to these fights. I swear. I love it. It's always just the motivation that I need, is going to watch kickboxing and Muay Thai. And now I'm just hyped. I am so hyped about everything, and I'm hyped for the next event, which I think I saw that they're supposed to do in August. So that'll be awesome. And UFC St. Louis is coming up. UFC 300 is in less than 2 weeks. Oh my God. I got still a lot of research to do. So I will be, that's what I'll be up to. If you're wondering what I'm doing with my free time, that is what I'm doing. But, yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited. My first UFC event, UFC 300. Gosh, this is going to be insane. So I'm really, really hyped for that. I'm hyped for everything going on with St. Louis combat sports in general. It's awesome. So that's all I got for you guys today. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting the podcast. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week.